KTTV marking 70 years on the air. From the 1949 Rose Parade to the Beatles and LA's own British invasion, to the quakes that have caused so much destruction, the trials, the tribulations, and the celebrations we all shared. We've been there with you for every major event. Now join us as we look back at the times that shaped our lives. Plus, we'll take you deep underground where decades of historic film is preserved and is now being retrieved and painstakingly restored. And we'll open a time capsule to watch history unfold. Priceless film of LA's history that no one's seen in a half a century. Along with members of our own Fox 11 News team, we're joined by actors Ed Begley Jr. and Kate Linder of The Young and the Restless. Plus, a special KTTV performance from an original band on the stage at Woodstock.
Celebrating KTTV 70 years. This is the KTTV 70 Film Time Capsule.
Welcome to the KTTV 70 Fox 11 Film Time Capsule. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be taking you back in time. We'll be speaking with some familiar faces from our Fox 11 News team about the KTTV 70 stories we've covered so far, and the biggest stories the city has ever seen. And we're doing something pretty amazing, too. You see those boxes? They contain film that hasn't been seen in 50 years. Time capsules into the past, and we'll look at some of that film for the first time in decades. But first, check out some of the stories we've done already. Since 1949, KTTV has been in the news business.
From the scene to your television screen, that's the up-to-the-minute coverage of the KTTV television news.
Southern California history, as the greatest Imagineer to ever live unveils his personal dream come true.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
I'm certain that our citizens join me in expressing appreciation to Walter O'Malley for his show of confidence in Los Angeles.
It was a hot August afternoon, August 29th, 1970. Ruben Salazar was covering a massive anti-war protest in East LA. Our KTTV cameras were there as the riots raged on through the night.
And the only one that didn't make it was Ruben.
It's 1 o'clock, August 8th, 1962. A hearse slowly pulls into the Westwood Memorial Cemetery. Inside, the body of 36-year-old Marilyn Monroe.
She has unwittingly and unfortunately played the greatest role of her career.
Inauguration 1973, Tom Bradley's first term as Los Angeles mayor. KTTV's cameras were there outside City Hall.
I don't know how you thank 3 million people.
Naked, tortured, and dumped. 10 young women and girls ages 12 to 28 found dead and draped across LA area hillsides. The media dubbed the killer the Hillside Strangler.
The Pope crammed in 10 public events during his whirlwind visit to L.A. on September 15th and 16th, 1987.
I'm so tired, my feet are shaking.
KTTV carried every minute of the spectacle live.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tony McEwing, and what a morning it has been.
KTTV's Tony McEwing, on the air minutes after the Northridge earthquake's first jolt. It triggered fires, broke buildings, knocked out power.
We are sitting in the dark because much of the power here at Fox News was knocked out.
So you were how old when you first walked through these doors?
Probably 18.
18?
Yeah.
At the Whiskey A Go-Go, Robbie Krieger is a living legend.
The Doors.
Long before the Doors were world famous, the iconic whiskey opened in 1964.
The North Hollywood Shootout.
We have a possible 211 in progress at the Bank of America. Bank of America.
Just repeating those words is chilling.
We have shots fired.
Some great stories. Let's meet some of our KTTV News team. Alex Michelson, Christine Devine, Gigi Graciette, Laura Diaz, Phil Schumann. And, you know, Christine, when we looked at those stories, there's so many things that we covered. What did you think as you were watching those clips.
I actually go farther back. My grandfather owned a TV store when TV was first coming out. So when I saw that very, very old footage, it made me think back in time that way. And I think that we define history sometimes by what we lived through and the generations, what we experienced personally. So when I look at this old footage, it reminds me that the history of LA is vast and deep and great, and just to see that footage really took me back in time.
All of us have covered some mighty big stories. Alex, what's one of the biggest you've covered?
Well, from a political perspective, the rise of Donald Trump is the most interesting political story you could ever think of. But locally, the Chris Dorner story is something that I'll never forget. The entire city terrorized for several days, and everybody sort of not knowing what was going to happen next. It became sort of a national drama, everybody following. And I remember being up in Big Bear and realizing that he was so close to where we all were standing. It was terrifying, unlike anything that I'd ever seen before.
It was chilling. And Gigi, you had a couple of big scoops in that too.
Dorner was one of the big stories also that I covered. And I remember standing there, and it turns out he was just literally feet away from all of us. And for me, it would probably be the disappearance of Aramaz Andresian Jr., little Peaky, that I sort of baptized everybody's child when he went missing, and the interview with his mother, her appeal, her plea to get information on her missing child, and ultimately, sadly, his murder.
Yeah, Laura, you covered many big stories.
Well, you know, there are so many. I would say the North Hollywood shootout, I was on the air live when that happened. And to see these officers under siege, basically, it was a story of David and Goliath. They did not have the firepower to respond to those bank robbers who were higher than a kite and coming at them with every kind of weapon imaginable. It actually changed the way things were handled at the LAPD after that they have to be able to protect themselves and the citizens. So that was one big story I'll never forget, being on the air live and watching it evolve. But also OJ, because here was this person who was so well known, beloved internationally, being accused of this horrific crime, everything from the arrest to the chase to the trial and then another trial. That was a story with legs that went on for days. And I remember people would stop me even when I was putting gas in the car and say, "What's happening with OJ today?" It was an obsession.
Right. Yeah, Phil, and we were all involved in that as well.
Yeah, the O.J. Simpson story is the biggest story I think any of us will ever cover. But what I wanted to add was just a couple of years before that, and related, it was the Rodney King beating and the riots and the trials, because that changed not just the LAPD and the culture and the history of our city, but really policing throughout the country. And if it wasn't for that George Holliday's home video, it would have never been a story. And some people who worked on the O.J. Simpson case, and we're working on these for the 70th Stories down the road, believe that that verdict was a payback to the LAPD for Rodney King.
And some of the jurors who have been interviewed say that it actually was.
Yeah.
It was a payback for what had happened there.
We know part of our mission with KTTV's 70th anniversary is to revisit and preserve the past. They're the stories and history of Southern California. And you might be surprised just where that historic film is being stored. Welcome to Hutchinson, Kansas. There's about 45,000 people who live here. The locals call this Hutch. It's known for a number of things, but mostly for its huge salt mines. That's why they call this Salt City. Because inside this building,
we're just going to get on and then we'll go down.
And down that double-decker hoisted elevator lies Los Angeles history. Lee Spence is one of the owners of underground vaults and storage in Hutchinson.
And it's all 650 feet underground.
We're traveling at 15 miles an hour. This is fast. I can feel it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for our camera light, we'd be in pitch black darkness. Thank you. When we finally get to rock bottom, we're met by signs telling us which way to escape if necessary, and a conveyor belt filled with salt rocks.
We're actually going down one of the main corridors here.
A drive into a somewhat magical place where Kansas meets Hollywood. And few people from the outside world have ever seen it until now. Now here, Warner Brothers right there, big Hollywood movie maker. Lee Spence says most major Hollywood players are here and have stored films like The Wizard of Oz, Titanic, and TV shows like Glee and Modern Family. What in effect you have here is 75 linear miles of storage space with over 6 million boxes of valuables down here. And look what we found. KTTV News. For years, KTTV has stored precious LA film in this mine. 650 boxes of film. 4 decades of news stories here, all secure. Searching high and low, we came across stories long forgotten. Real local history. For me, it was like finding buried treasure. I'm like a kid in a candy store. Film cans filled with multiple reels of KTTV stories going back to the very beginning. November 1949. Planning and construction for the 1950 Rose Parade with its Queen Court and floats. Los Angeles flying saucers. December of 49. The Air Force denied the existence of flying saucers. We covered that too. But most of what we dug up was on the serious side. Film requiring very special handling. So we should try to come down here to the first images and see what that looks like. And frame by frame, we revealed pieces of LA history. LAPD ambush, Clark Gable, Oppenheimer. That was the guy that created the A-bomb. In fact, there's KTTV film of the early A-bomb test in the Nevada desert. Nixon. The process of digitizing our KTTV archive has already begun, ever so slowly. Historic memories, saved for posterity in an old Kansas salt mine. Let's get to these boxes. They came right from Kansas. I gave all of you white gloves.
The gloved ones.
Yes, the gloved ones.
But we're wearing 2 gloves.
But there's a reason, yes, there's a reason for this, and that's because the film in these boxes are so old, and our oil in our hands can damage the film. It's stuff that hasn't been seen in decades. We had the option to be able to basically call the warehouse in Kansas and say, we'd like to have a box from a certain year. We wanted 1969, which is that box right there. And we wanted 69 because that was a really big year. The summer of 69, you had the Manson murders, you had Woodstock. There was just so much stuff going on in that period of time.
Tarantino's new movie that's coming out.
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't know exactly what we're going to end up with here, but that's the box. We haven't seen anything from this box.
We need a drum roll.
Drum roll, please. Boy, they create. Okay. There's a drum roll. So, what do we got here? Well, look at that. So, these are big canisters, okay? They say Metro Media at the time. Metro Media was the company that owned us. And KTTV News. And I'm going to open this up. And here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to give Christine the manifest. And there's a manifest here that basically says what's in the box.
All right.
But I want to give all of you some film. Now, be very careful with this because these things have some masking tape on the side that tell us a little bit about what's on there. But they also can come out. They can unspool. So we really want to be careful. There, Gigi.
Okay.
And Alex, what do you got?
This is the San Clemente something.
The San Clemente something?
Apparently.
San Clemente demo.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so something was
apparently the
demolished.
handwriting wasn't so good in 1969.
Christine?
I'm not looking at anything that really stands out. I mean, it says hospital, AstroTurf.
That's what I have, hospital.
Oh,
You have
wait.
hospital?
LAX bugs.
Ooh.
I've got Ireland.
I have drugs.
Catholic priest in Ireland.
But you know what's interesting about
drugs?
these?
On Ireland.
I have drugs.
What's interesting about this, though, is on any given news day for us, unless there's some big story out there, we might have car wrecks, we might have anything going on. It could be a drug thing. It could be something very mundane.
It goes to show you how important the slug is, too.
So,
Right.
so this is what is the equivalent of raw footage?
Yeah.
The cameraman would go out and just roll film, and then they'd figure out if they wanted to use it and edit it later.
They'd go out, they'd shoot it, they'd put it through a soup to develop it, yes. And we're going to go through these canisters, and at the end of the hour, we're going to take a look at some of this film, some of this KTTV film time capsule video from our archives.
Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, just some of the famous names who played at Woodstock. Up next, the first band to take the stage that day is from right here in Southern California. The story of Sweetwater coming up on the special KTTV 70 Film Time Capsule.
Judge George.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Put the machine guns up here.
This is a different kind of war.
There's something happening here.
The Manson murders, the moon landing, and Vietnam. Big events that shaped 1969, but so did the giant musical festival known as Woodstock. Did you know that first band that played at Woodstock was from Southern California? It's the story of Sweetwater, the band that lost its voice shortly after the biggest break they could ever hope for. August 1969, the Vietnam War was raging. Anti-war protests were spreading. Video from our own KTTV archive shows that right here in downtown Los Angeles. And while the sound of protesters in the streets and guns in Southeast Asia were blasting, it was the sound of guitar strings and keyboards blasting through the air in upstate New York. This was Woodstock. This is Sweetwater.
What's wrong in our schools?
It's been 50 years since Nancy Nevins, Alex Del Zoppo, and Fred Herrera played Woodstock back in the summer of 1969. A picture of it hangs in her Tujunga living room.
The biggest thing I remember is the size of the crowd, from the stage and from the helicopter. We were the first band to fly in there, and it was unbelievable. It was like a carpet, but it was human beings. And when I was standing on stage looking out, it wasn't that it frightened me, but it sure registered. Like, wow, look at that.
Large crowds weren't new to them. They had performed in pop festival after pop festival, lots of them, big ones. If you ask them, they'll tell you Sweetwater was one of the first fusion rock bands mixing genres and different types of instruments. There were 7 band members back then. Some sadly had passed on, so as they remember Woodstock, they think about the whole band.
When we got to Woodstock, we had seen them all. It wasn't a big deal to play in front of, a couple 100,000 people, but this was ridiculous. The buzz backstage was there's 500,000 people here.
To Del Zoppo, that translated to 1 million eyes and 1 million ears. No pressure, right? But first they had to get to that stage. They were supposed to be the first act. That didn't happen. Took too long to push through that sea of people. So Richie Havens became the first act, followed by Sweetwater, which went down in the history books as the first band.
No one wants to be first in a thing like that, ever.
Why?
Because it's a tough position to be in. You're the one that warms up the crowd.
Alex was in the Air Force Reserves. He had to get back from New York to Riverside to report for duty the next day. So being first wasn't so much about being historic, but being on time the next day or get in trouble with the military.
I knew I had to get out of there the minute we were done, or my butt was grass, you know how they say.
Their records were popular, and so were they.
Everything was going well for us.
It was an upward trajectory, but 4 months after Woodstock, Nancy Nevins, just 20 years old, was hit by a drunk driver.
December 8, 1969, and I got on the freeway, and there was fender benders, and there was no clear lane. Stopped my car, I turned to my friend, I said, "Whew, we made it." Right after I said that, this drunk didn't even see me, and nothing happened to my friend. The car was crushed, completely munched.
Doctors didn't think she'd live. A priest was even called in to administer the last rites.
And the band was devastated because, we were so close to huge stardom. We're just there. And I wasn't supposed to even live. And then after a while, when I didn't die, they said, well, she'll be a vegetable. And I came out of that coma cussing, very inconvenienced by all that life support.
Brain damage sidelined the Woodstock star for 12 years.
We lost touch with her for about 20 years. That's a long time.
She had little support and she got her life back together on her own. That to me is the most amazing thing.
I learned to sing again, I learned to perform again, and I studied. I've just been so blessed.
Sweetwater disbanded so the rest of the group could get on with their lives. Nancy went back to school, got a different career as an English professor, and in 1989, these 3 met back up. Meanwhile, a half a century later, the 3 played for us. And remembered that rainy, muddy festival known as Woodstock.
what made that thing so great was that, you know, everyone was out there, they were getting rained on, they were in mud, they had no provisions. It happened last minute. They had to find the location within a few weeks because they lost apparently 2 other locations that they were already starting to set up in. And yet there was no fights, there was no problems. You know, it was a beautiful thing. And
it was all about love.
Yes, it was.
Nancy Nevins and Alex Del Zoppo of Sweetwater are with us here today. They'll perform a little bit later on, but I wanted to ask you about that summer of 1969. What an incredible time that was.
It was a fabulous time for music. Oh, the artistic, creative newness of everything. Everything was discovered.
Yeah, and there were so many songs back then that were like anti-war protest songs and all sort of things like that. How much were you influenced by that war?
Oh, I was in the Air Force, so I was very influenced by it. And I wrote a protest song myself.
Yeah. So bottom line is that was a very memorable summer, not just because of Woodstock, but because of everything going on in the world.
Oh, so many things went on. We were busy all the time.
I'm so grateful that you're here, too. Thank you so very much for being here. And they'll be back with a special performance a little bit later on. Then we'll unspool that 1969 film. For now, we'll be right back.
More of the stories that helped make Southern California history, including the Beatles invasion and later our first Rose Parade. And the Hollywood whodunit that put a megastar on the hot seat on the special KTTV70 Film Time Capsule.
We meant more to kids than Jesus did.
Welcome back to our celebration as KTTV marks 70 years, bringing the biggest stories to Southern California. With us now are some very familiar faces to Southern California. They're here to continue the conversation on film restoration and why it's so important. Ed Begley Jr. is an actor and environmental activist. Think St. Elsewhere and Better Call Saul. His latest show, Bless This Mess, has been picked up for a 2nd season. Kate Linder is best known for her 37 years on The Young and Restless as Esther Valentine. Kay Alden, a former writer on The Young and the Restless. And you lived there in Kansas for a very long time, in Hutchinson, right?
In Hutchinson.
In Hutchinson, right where that mine was that I went down into. And also Mark Quigley from UCLA's Film and Television Archives. And we're so glad all of you are here, seriously. You've been in this business for so long, Ed, as has your dad, Ed Begley Sr., if you will. 12 Angry Men. He won an Oscar for Sweet Bird of Youth. You look at your dad there on the screen. What kind of thoughts do you have right now?
I miss him still. He died in 1970, and he was a great actor and a great father. So it's many years now, but I just loved him very much and get to appreciate his work again and again.
Your thoughts about film preservation?
Very important to me. I've been an Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences member since 1978. I've been serving the board. I served for 15 years as a governor. So film preservation is very dear to me, too, as I know it is to you.
Imagine trying to teach children about the civil rights movement without footage of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Reading about it in a book just wouldn't be the same without having the footage.
And Kate, for you?
How can you go into the future if you don't know your past? I think it's extremely important, and people need to know the history.
Kate?
So many of our young people do not value our history. We need to use film and television from the past to maybe get a better grip with them in terms of their history.
You know, I think it's really interesting that when these things were filmed years ago, who in the world would have ever thought that we might be doing digital video?
Right.
And to think that we now stream, and when film was the state of the art, it really is something.
It's amazing how far film came in my lifetime. At first, there was no color film, as you probably know. It was all black and white. So to make a color movie, you had cameras. The Technicolor camera had 3 strips of film going through simultaneously with prisms that separated blue, green, red.
You know, the old film days. Got an old favorite film? Okay.
The Road. On Golden Pond.
Oh, yeah. Sure,
I
of
love
course.
that film.
Yeah. Ed?
Chinatown is one of my favorite movies of all time.
This might sound like a ringer, but 12 Angry Men is one of my all-time favorite films.
Yes.
So
Oh, bless
it's great to have
Mine
Ed
too.
Begley here.
Mine too.
100% agree.
Yeah. Let me just ask you as a final thought here. As we think about preserving the past for people in the future, what do you want to leave us with?
I want to leave the young people with some hope, people of all ages with some hope. From 1970, when we started to set about cleaning up the air in LA, we had horrible choking smog in the 50s and 60s. That's why I started in 1970. We have 4 times the cars since 1970, millions more people, but a fraction of the smog. We can do other big things now with climate change and what have you, and you can create jobs doing it.
Kate?
I think it's important for everyone to pay attention, to see what is actually going on and not... people are just looking at their phones and they're not really engaging. They're not in the present. And I think that's extremely important.
Okay.
Looking at our history can show us the reality of what is and, like Ed said, maybe show us ways to find hope.
And hope is really what it's all about, right?
The intro to your program, you showed a clip of Ruben Salazar, someone so inspirational, someone that we can still learn so much from, taken from us much too soon. That's what film is able to do.
Mark, Kate, Ed, thank you so very much for being here. Really appreciate it. You're watching KTTV 70's Film Time Capsule. Minutes from now, we'll unspool that 1969 film from the salt mines of Kansas and take a look for the very first time. We'll be back after this. We're black and white, just like it used to be decades ago. Take a look. The fire at LA Central Library.
70 years of history in Southern California, like the freeway interchange that changed how we get around, to the former cop on a wild murder spree. It's all coming up on this special KTTV 70 Film Time Capsule.
For months now, we've been searching our KTTV archives, finding unusual stories like this rocket car, a water skiing elephant, a proposal for a unique monorail, plus a new innovation at the time, the catalytic converter to clean up our dirty air. Welcome back to KTTV 70, the Film Time Capsule. The mission this year, to do 70 stories commemorating KTTV's 70 years on TV, and along the way, to retrieve and restore some precious LA film archives. Here's another example of this year's KTTV 70 stories. The first thing we ever broadcast was on January 1st, 1949, and it was the Tournament of Roses parade. The sound is missing. You can't appreciate the color of the flowers, but it was as spectacular then as it is now.
Here's the hub of our new and rapidly expanding freeway system.
We dug out this one from deep in our archives, 1953. The downtown Los Angeles 4-level interchange is open for traffic.
Starring Lana Turner.
Poster pinup turned Hollywood starlet, at one point one of the biggest movie stars in the world. But in a real-life drama involving Turner's daughter Cheryl Crane, that knife and a terrifying struggle with Turner's boyfriend suddenly took center stage.
Cheryl got a knife and plunged it.
Well, you can see all the stars as you walk down Hollywood Boulevard.
This star that I'm going to receive today belongs to you fans.
Jose and Kitty Menendez found brutally murdered in their Beverly Hills home. Their sons eventually arrested in a case that would be watched across the world.
Gruesome murder plot, secrets of the Menendez family.
We've had a shooting inside the Jewish Community Center.
Said your son is in the school here? I'm so sorry, ma'am.
It's hard to forget this image. Little children being let out of a building holding hands. It was the day the worst kind of violence came to this quiet suburban neighborhood.
The fire at LA Central Library.
It's so smoky you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Our KTTV cameras allowed inside saw that flames chewed away at books, newspapers, and everything else stored in the building that would burn. History in ruins.
You never thought that hip-hop would take it this far.
March 9th, 1997, on LA streets, a drive-by after the Soul Train Awards. Biggie, his real name Christopher Wallace, was shot and died at Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
It happened again.
They were slumped in a car atop a parking structure where they lived in Irvine.
February 3rd, 2013, one of the most dire situations in the department's history.
Dorner is armed and dangerous.
Our Fox 11 crews and reporters were covering every minute of it. But at this moment, no one has any idea just how perilous the situation would become.
Back with our panel of KTTV All-Stars, and you really are all stars, all of you. And Alex, you know, we talk about this notion of preserving the past. And why is that important?
Well, when you think about the Holocaust, you think of never forget, never again, and that history is doomed to repeat itself so often. And so often through history, we have seen history repeat itself when people don't learn the lessons of the past. And television has been an incredible platform for people to have a shared experience. That's really what I'm struck by looking at a lot of these images. We all can remember exactly where we were when we experienced so many of them. And because of TV, everybody in Southern California were able to see the same images at the same time, and it brought people together in a way that no other thing had before the invention of television.
You could take that nationally, right, Gigi, with 9/11? We all were glued to our sets, right?
When we weren't working, a lot of us were sort of living history, covering it, but when we weren't working, we were all glued to our television sets, watching what was happening at the Pentagon, what was happening in New York, and we all sort of share that history. And watching that video, it immediately brings you back. It's like listening to a song that brings you back to a certain boyfriend or girlfriend or a memory. You watch those stories and you remember, oh, I was here when I was on the freeway when OJ was in that pursuit. He went by me. I was here watching.
Did he really?
He really did. I was on the 405. I'll never forget. I was on the 405 and all of a sudden traffic was stopped and people were running by my car to get to the center median to watch him drive by. And I'll never forget the row of helicopters. They were all flying sort of in a horizontal line as they went up down the 405.
It must have been hard for you not to be reporting.
Now you'd whip out your cell phone, you'd document that, you'd send that into the station, you'd call in and go live with us. So the way we're telling stories now is different, and the platforms we're telling them on. It's social media. You're tweeting it, you're putting it on your Instagram, you're doing your pursuit live on Facebook. So it's kind of a changing with the times and the technology.
Well, the technology is no question changing.
And yet at the core of it is still storytelling when you think about it. A good story is a good story. And I think it's that feeling that we all have, that human connection that we need. And in times of trouble, we'll turn to each other and we want to hear the message. So I think that's where our jobs can be so very important, and that responsibility of being accurate and getting the information out. You realize it really is a public service that we do.
And Phil, let me just ask you, when we look at this repetitiveness over the years, and Alice, I think, eloquently put this, that if we continue to make the mistakes of the past, we are doomed to do them again in the future. But we keep coming up on stories we've seen before.
I just think that obviously it's important to remember the past. And I think in the current political climate that we're in, without getting too deep into it, the news media is looked at by some perhaps with suspicion, which I think is so unfair, because what we do is so important. And when something big happens, I know, like, you know, we all have our phones like in our pockets right now. We spend so much time on it. But when something big happens, you turn on the TV.
TV can do something better than any other form, which it can do motion and emotion. You can't get the emotion by reading a newspaper story the same way you get by watching on TV. You can't get the emotion via tweet. You can't get the pursuit and everything that's happening live. I mean, TV still does live better than anybody else, and that's when the big stories really matter.
And it remains a collective experience for I think, everybody. We'll be back with more of our KTTV70 Film Time Capsule after this.
What did we find in those boxes from 1969? Stuffed with old film that hasn't been seen in decades? We'll play some of it for you coming up. Plus, we'll take you on a tour of the Motion Picture Academy's new museum dedicated to film preservation on this special KTTV70 Film Time Capsule.
I am Dracula.
Dracula, brought to life by Bela Lugosi. You're looking at very rare footage from our KTTV archives of Lugosi at the Metropolitan Hospital in Norwalk. KTTV footage the family has never seen. I see it brings a smile to your face right now.
It does.
Welcome back to our KTTV70 Film Time Capsule. That Bela Lugosi film is one of the items from the KTTV archive. It's that type of film preservation, which is at the heart of this next story. I put on a special hard hat to tour the new Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. This is the front of the building. This is an old building, the main company. That's Carrie Brower, the director of what will be the Museum of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. It's at the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax. Part of it is a new spherical-looking building with a state-of-the-art 1,000-seat theater, complete with digital projection, 35 and 70 millimeter formats, and room for a 60-piece orchestra. Back in the main building, there's a smaller theater. It's on the lower floor, which is part of the makeover of the old May Company department stores built in 1939, the same year as some mighty big movies.
Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
And that great big sphere may look futuristic, but it's supposed to be a throwback to the 20s. That's when famous movie director Cecil B. DeMille built an airfield across the street to land dirigibles.
Which are machines that are meant to transport you from one place to another, just like a movie.
And just like a movie, let's make a transition here.
And we've changed this to being the lobby with a restaurant and retail and even exhibition.
Conservators off-site are working to prepare objects that'll be inside. And over in this part of the lobby,
it's a very special gallery. It's the Spielberg Family Gallery.
It's where you'll see all things Wizard of Oz.
Out here, you'll enter the house. It'll be all sepia. And then as you enter the gallery, when you come out the other side of the house,
you'll be
in Munchkinland, and it'll be in color. And we'll have a Technicolor camera there. You'll learn about Technicolor and the color process.
There's lots of exhibit space.
Here we are, we're in a project space now. This will be used for projects done by filmmakers and artists and individuals using digital projection mapping.
Look how high that ceiling is, 30 feet tall. The first exhibit in here, a massive waterfall. Now, up to the second floor,
where we actually start a whole exhibition about the story of film and filmmaking.
Exploring films, costumes from movies like Brokeback Mountain, Bonnie and Clyde, and Enter the Dragon. You'll see the likes of Gloria Swanson from Sunset Boulevard, looks like she's ready for a close-up. Powerhouse directors like Orson Welles, Ida Lupino, and Alfred Hitchcock. We're gonna go to where?
Yeah, now we've gone up from the second floor to the fourth floor. And we're going to take a look at the exhibition spaces.
The first big one, a tribute to the work of animator Hayao Miyazaki. But the thing that struck us was the Academy's effort to save and digitize the past. Why is it important to save all these things, going back to silent movies, right?
Well, you know, movies are really us. We see ourselves in movies. So by preserving them, we're really preserving ourselves and our own history and the way we used to see ourselves.
They were the first band ever to take the stage at Woodstock, a local band with an amazing story. Sweetwater performs here in studio, next on our KTTV70 Film Time Capsule.
Sometimes I feel like
That's Sweetwater's Motherless Child, one of the famous songs they performed at Woodstock. Welcome back. All this hour, we've been focusing on KTTV's amazing history. Who could forget 1969? The Man on the Moon, Vietnam, Charles Manson, the Woodstock Festival. This was the first band to take the stage after Richie Havens performed. Please welcome Sweetwater.
Look out, somebody's coming. He's got the key to your door. He ain't who you thought of. He's not what you're looking for. Let's go to the city. Put down your papa's rake and hoe. I'll bring you love and money. Ooh. Look out, somebody's coming. He's got you on the list. He'll take the time to haunt you, baby, tempt you with the things you missed. Let's go to the city. Put down your papa's rake and hoe. I'll bring you love and money. Ooh. He wants you to remember his face. Heaven's not real, baby. This is the place. Hey, hey, yeah. Woo. Look out, somebody's coming. Still you don't believe he's there. He says you've been sold. Honey, you say you don't care. Let's go to the city. Put down your papa's rake and hoe. I'll bring you love and money. Ooh. He wants you to remember his face. Heaven's not real, baby. This is the place. Hey, hey, hey. Look out, baby. Woo! He's coming to get you. This dude is bad. Watch yourself. Watch yourself. Look out. Look out. Look out. Look out. Oh, he wants you to remember his face.
Wow. Lovely. So much fun. Nancy and Evans, Alex Del Zoppo, thank you very much. It's time. It is now time. What's on those film reels we haven't seen in 50 years? The projector is all spooled up. History is ready to roll. KTTV's historic archives retrieved from the salt mines of Kansas. We're all headed to the movies next on KTTV70 Film Time Capsule. We produced a special podcast on our KTTV70 stories. This treasure hunt we're conducting into our KTTV film archive. As time capsules go, this is the real deal, really. And you can find this special episode on What the How on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to KTTV70 Film Time Capsule. At the beginning of the show, we unpacked boxes of historic KTTV film, which hasn't been seen or touched in decades. We didn't know what we'd find. And now, Fox 11 archivist Mitch Waldo is here with his projector, and I really want to hear the reaction from our studio guests as we see some of this film rolled for the very first time in decades. Mitch, roll it.
You supposed to be? You look like a stripper to me.
I'm an Egyptian priestess from 23rd century Earth.
Are you taken from a character from Star Trek?
No, it's just sort of an extrapolation of my own.
This is a Star Trek convention, by the way, in Los Angeles way back then. Spider-Man.
I didn't realize Spider-Man was in Star Trek.
Pre-Comic-Con, right.
Yeah. This is a Spider-Man costume.
Is this taken from an actual episode?
No, it's not an episode at all. You see, it's from a line of comic books, Marvel Comics, and one of their biggest selling superheroes is Spider-Man.
Well, what are you hoping to win tonight?
Attention.
Isn't that the creature from the Black Lagoon?
It's like the Masked Singer. The amazing quality of the film, it still looks great.
Well, Chuck, now we know where Ashman went on vacation.
All I can think about is that someday people are going to be sitting here and looking at us going, wow, what were they wearing? How funny they dressed in 2019.
Mitch, roll it for us. Clip number 2.
I like this part.
The countdown. Take you back in time. Yes.
So this is Wrigley Field in downtown Los Angeles. I know we think of Chicago having Wrigley Field, but this is where the Angels played.
What is this?
I don't know what that is.
Are we sure?
Weird.
That's Wrigley Field?
It's like a fire.
Looks like a fire.
Well, maybe there was some news event there that day.
Mitch, what is this? Because this is a news story of some kind. She looks affected by something.
LAPD cadets.
Without the sound, you could feel her emotion.
Oh,
there.
yes, you could.
Yeah, came through.
No, they're cadets.
These are the cadets. Got it.
Wow.
Film is so much stronger in its ability to survive than
It's
than
very
tape.
resilient. So you can take film, and if you store it properly for 60 years, you take it out of the vault, you can hold it up to the light, it's person readable. The digital files that we're creating today, they're going to need to be babysit, continually migrated and taken care of.
All right, Mitch, let's roll it.
Ooh, what is that?
So this is Devonshire Downs.
We played there. You played there? Devonshire Downs right there? Are you serious?
That's what it looked like after the festival, right?
After the concert.
You guys performed and they made a mess.
Oh, well, that's how good we were.
Alex, how many people were there? But this was a major venue, right?
200,000.
Yes.
200,000?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, this was a big deal. This wasn't a small concert. This was a big deal.
Yeah.
Name a few big acts.
Jimi Hendrix, he played twice.
Wow.
The Birds, all these.
Sweetwater.
Everybody you know.
Sweetwater.
Yeah.
How exciting. How exciting for something to pop up and you were there.
Yeah. That is phenomenal.
You were there.
It's just phenomenal.
Okay, we got number 4.
Okay.
This is the last one. All right, let's roll it again.
Here we go.
Oh, it's a big elephant.
But where is this is the question.
So this is back. This is back in L.A. This is back in 1962, I'm told. And that elephant, they tell me, was named Queenie. And this was sort of a promotion, I understand, for a circus that was in town. And this elephant went water skiing.
Oh, baby.
There she goes.
She looked particularly happy about this event.
This is what you call packing up your trunk and leaving.
Yeah. So that baby is 50 years old now.
Yes. Wow.
Well, much like the elephant packed up its trunk and left, that's kind of what we're going to do right now. I'd like to thank our special guest, Ed Begley, Jr., Kate Linder, writer Kay Alden, UCLA archivist Mark Quigley, plus Sweetwater, and the team from KTTV Fox 11 All-Stars. From all of us here at Fox 11, good night and thanks for joining us.